Hello, Thursday. World Economic News, people. Are you ready for this? It's going to be tricky. The opening chart looks boring, but it sets us off to where we're going. It's the bank's reserves with the Fed. You can see going back to 2006, that's currency in circulation in blue at the bottom. Nothing's changed there. Nothing's changed. What has changed is the bank's reserves with the Fed. Now, the question is, does that make any difference? Obviously, it makes some difference because they've got over $1 trillion worth of reserves at the Fed. But in the big world, does it make any difference? Let's move on. This chart with Batman in the middle. Can you see Batman in the middle there? Yep. Batman in the middle goes back to 1992. Now, this represents, I'll have to do some explaining. Banks keep their money with the Fed. They don't keep it in the banks. All banks' money effectively is with the Fed. Now, this chart represents the amount of transactions that the banks send information up to the Fed to change money around to different places. Okay, so they're sending money around to different places. Information up to the Fed, give money to that bank, give it to, hold it yourself, do this, do that, buy, do whatever it might be. Okay. So these are the amount of transactions that the Fed are instructed to do by the banks. And as you can see, it goes from 1992, where it was quite low, and as financialization kicks in, it goes up through Batman, and then up to a great peak before the Great Recession started. Okay. And what we see now, it's gone all the way down. And since this recession, since they've had these huge amounts of reserves, that the amount of transactions compared to the amount of reserves that they've got in the central bank is really low. In other words, they're just not pinging money around like they used to, because they're just not finding better things to do with that money. That is the bottom line of all this. The banks are not finding better things to do with their money. Now, the great thing from Peter Schiff type people is that as soon as they do, this money will flood, and then it'll be increased and spin round and spin out of control, and it'll be hyperinflation. But my question to everybody is, what are the banks going to find better to do with their money? Open question. Next chart is, these are M2 money supplies. Going back to 1996, starting at the bottom, the United States has averaged 6.3% year-on-year increase. The Euroland, ECB, has increased 7.1 M2. China has increased 17.4. So you can say, if anybody's increasing their money supply, M2 style, it's China. Since this Great Recession started, USA has dropped the increase of the M2 down to 3.5. The Euroland has dropped down to 2.3. China has wanged it up to 24.6. This is your M3 that everybody used to get all messed up about, and it's from John Williams' Shadow Stats, who's continued it. And you can see the blue one, it's was up at 18 just at the point that the crisis came, and it's just gone all the way down. It was going down to -6 and is still running at -2. That's your M3, according to John Williams, who's a classic hyperinflationist. Would want that number to be huge to back up his theories. It's not. It's at -2. You've got M1 running high, but we can ignore that. And then there's confirmation of the M2 money supply. John Williams reckons it at 4. And these other people said it was at 3.5. So we've got basic agreement. Moving on into the real world. They need to lend money to people. That's one thing banks can do, which is a better thing to do with their money. This is total non-revolving credit outstanding. non-revolving credit United States from St. Louis Fed, and it's going up at the moment, but those are student loans. Those are unemployed or unemployable young people generally that think it's a better idea to continue education and take a loan out than it is to try and get a job or know that they can't get a job in the real world. That's all that is. It's not car loans, it's student loans. Otherwise, it's not going up. This is revolving credit. This is credit cards. The banks would love that to be going up because they can make a lot of money out of that, and it's not. It's going down. And I won't go through all the other things that banks can do with money, but there's nothing very clever out there. So we say, well, what can happen? Interest rates could go up. That's one thing. And then it might be more advantageous to buy treasury bills if you can get a decent coupon on it. Or the whole economy can get better. And if the economy gets better, they're more likely to loan to people like you and me and entrepreneurs and local corner shop businesses, big, medium and small businesses. And that might take off. Is there any sign that the economy is taking off? No. This is Business Insider Cluster Stock. Moving on, Carl Icahn. Let's just say love him or hate him. Yeah, I think that's probably the safest thing to say. Just announced he's returning 1.8 billion to his clients, and he's warning of another crisis. And we read, while we are not, this is his letter to his clients, telling them why he's returning the money from his hedge fund. While we are not forecasting renewed market dislocation is very bad, this possibility cannot be dismissed. Given the rapid market run-up over the last 2 years and our ongoing concerns about the economic outlook and recent political tensions in the Middle East, I do not wish to be responsible to limited partners through another possible market crisis. So he's giving the money back. He can't think of anything better to do with the money. And he's a very streetwise dude. On to Financial Times. Alphaville. On the matter, Standard, this is, you'll have to follow the link to see this. It's rather a technical post, so you'll have to check the details behind it. On the matter, Standard & Poor's credit analyst Elena Ororochenko says, in our opinion, inflation has become or continues to be an important risk of macroeconomic and social stability in a number of countries, Asia Pacific, including Vietnam, Sri Lanka, India, Indonesia, Mongolia, Cambodia, Cook Islands, Fiji, Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is where inflation could kick off riots and stuff. Later in the article we get recent developments in several Middle Eastern countries have raised questions about contagion effects. Such popular uprisings are highly unpredictable, although the risk appears to be more pronounced where high unemployment among young, inflation, poverty or wide income gaps are combined with growing political disillusionment in an autocratic and often corrupt regime. Nothing we don't know there. But in the past, the peoples of these countries have just looked round and gone, well, this is our lot. But now they're looking round and saying, well, that lot didn't like their lot and they've kicked off, so maybe we'll do it. Or worse, if the pro-democracy move, this is later again, it's a longer post for Alphaville this, or worse, if the pro-democracy, this is Egypt, if the pro-democracy movement lets itself be stampeded by the economic ruin narrative, structures could be put in place by technocrats under the aegis of military transitional government that would tie the eventual civilian government into actually quickening the pace of privatization. Egypt was privatizing already. Ideologues, including those of neoliberal stripe, are prone to a witchcraft mode of thinking. If the spell doesn't work, then it's not the fault of the magic, but rather the fault of the shaman who performed the spell. In other words, Mubarak was doing the privatizing neoliberal ideals, but not doing it well enough, so new people need to be put in place to do it. In other words, the logic could be that it was not neoliberalism that ruined Mubarak's Egypt, but the faulty application of neoliberalism. Dare we think that people have been meddling? This chart is political and social unrest index. If the number is low in any of those columns, Gini coefficient, Gini coefficient is the balance between rich and poor. If it's well out of whack, if the discrepancy is huge, on this the number will be small, and it's more likely to turn yellow or red. Youth unemployment, inflation, GDP per capita, etc. And you can see that at the top we've got Sudan, which we know is a terribly tricky place because it's got low numbers right across the board. And then going down, Iraq, Yemen, Nigeria, Algeria, Iran, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, China, Indonesia, Tunisia, South Africa. South Africa, yep, still not settled yet. Russia, Venezuela, Jordan, Turkey, Argentina, Libya, Lebanon, India, and Morocco. And you see Libya there, fourth from the bottom of that, with an awful lot of worse countries on this social unrest index. And for fun, I'll throw in the more civilized nations, and as you can see, the yellow and red comes out. But you can see, for example, the United States Gini coefficient is already at 5. There's too much income disparity, and youth unemployment is too high, giving a yellow stripe. Countries like the Netherlands at the bottom don't have any stripes at all. They are wonderfully stable. Well, it doesn't mean they've got huge quantities of money spare, though. Financial Times Alpha Bill will finish with the Saudi capacity puzzle. There's this chart. I'll just say that what they said in this article is that Saudis might have trouble picking up production to help out for the Libyan crisis because they'd already increased production to help out with the increase of price which happened before the Libyan crisis. So they'd need to increase, they have increased, and they would need to increase again. And this article says that they might have struggled to do the second lot of increasing. That was a lot to get through. Leave it with you. Thanks. Bye.